Giannis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fith chapter. Brian Chapman. Then it's Fith again. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fith chapter. That's right. Welcome to the Fith chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis 50. It's time for our second set of 50. It's episode 51, Dennis. Are you ready for 5 fantastic chapters?
I am. I'm also ready for some tacos, man. I can smell them from the media center downstairs, and I'm ready to go down there and get some.
Yeah, I'm ready to get some Chinese food. That's what I've got ready after the show. And I will say this. It doesn't look like Donald Trump is going to win Wisconsin, and I know that because he took all the credit for bringing back Big Ten football, but they've only played one game. They had one game canceled last week, and this coming week's game is canceled. I don't think the Trump supporters and Big Ten football fans in Wisconsin can be too happy about that.
Still seems like it's too early to call. We don't know. It's only the first quarter.
Yep.
If it was a football game.
That's true. In the first 5 minutes of the first quarter at that. Definitely want to thank everybody out there who is watching here on election night. If you're taking a break from Sleepy Joe and tax cheating Trump to watch on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch, and of course those that are watching after election night, because you can watch it at any time on one of those 3 social media platforms. Also, you can listen at any time via Apple, Google, and Spotify. Make sure that you subscribe. You participate in each show by sending in your feedback via YouTube or Facebook Live. And Dennis will be reading those comments during the course of today's show. Let's take a look at today's book. In the second chapter, Sleepy, not Joe, but Mel Tucker puts Michigan to sleep with his first career win at Michigan State with a win over the Wolverines. We'll give you the Spartan perspective on that big W. In the third chapter, the Lions smashed by the Colts, dropped to 3-4, losing record, and now you've got injuries to 2 key players, Kenny Golladay and Trey Flowers. Neither will participate in the next game against the Vikings. What now for the same old Lions? In the fourth chapter, the Tigers find their next manager. They hire AJ Hinch, the king of the trash cans. Was it a good move, or do you feel a little discomfort in your stomach that they hired a cheater? And then in the fifth chapter, it is the major wager. But Dennis, let's start off with the first chapter, and that takes us to Michigan and Michigan State. After week 1, we both knew what was going to happen in Ann Arbor. Michigan State turned it over 7 times against Rutgers and lost by 11. Michigan beat Minnesota in Minnesota by 25 points. We both predicted Big Blue would blow out the Spartans on Thursday's show. I changed my mind a little bit about a blowout on Friday nights because I saw what Minnesota did against Maryland, and I saw that Maryland actually beat Minnesota. And we all know that Maryland, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is an atrocious football team. And when I saw that, I said, wow, I guess Michigan just beat a really bad football team. And I actually went down to the casino on Saturday morning before the game and bet the Spartans to cover that 21.5 points. And not only did they make me rich, but they won the game. So I kind of wish I had bet them on the money line. And they dominated the Wolverines in that 27-24 win. I made fun of Sleepy Mel Tucker for giving Michigan that nickname, the team down the road, while seeming to nearly fall asleep while speaking to the fake news media last week. But his team was wide awake in that win. And we'll get to Michigan State once again in the second chapter. But for Michigan, no more undefeated talk. No more talk about challenging Ohio State like Reggie Bush was saying that they were going to do during the pregame Big Noon show on Fox. No more Milton for Heisman Trophy finalist talk. No more any of that. Instead, we've got speculation about J.I. Block M. Harbaugh after arguably the worst loss of his Michigan career. Dennis, we know that you're the Michigan fan. What did you think about your Wolverines taking this shocking L?
Yeah, I thought it was terrible from any way you want to look at it. You know, on offense, they couldn't push the ball down the field. Joe Milton didn't look anything like he did against Minnesota. Michigan couldn't run the ball between the tackles, the offensive line, which looked so athletic and powerful against the Gophers, wasn't that against Michigan State. And the defense was worse. They do what Don Brown always does. They played zero man right up on the wide receivers, and Michigan State's plan was to throw deep on them, and they did it all game, and Michigan didn't adjust, and that was disappointing. And you know what? It was a complete flop. It really was. With everything that went into week one, with Michigan looking pretty good, there was a lot to be excited about. And then Michigan State losing to Rutgers. I mean, this one looked like it was going to be an easy win for Michigan. It was anything but. And now the worst part is that, with Jim Harbaugh being in his sixth year, mostly, in the off season, the talk was, well, they can't beat Ohio State because Ohio State's just a juggernaut, man. They've got so much talent, coming out of their ears. They recruit, like top three, like they're Alabama, like they're Clemson. But you know what? Michigan can beat everybody else. Maybe, it'd be nice to see them win a bowl game here or there, but they're just, Ohio State's just too good. And then they go out and get popped by Michigan State. So everybody's reeling. Like, there's no answers right now. The only thing they can do is run the table. And, you don't feel very confident in that, at this point. Like, I didn't think nobody thought that they were going to beat Ohio State at any point. I know, like, Richie Bush saying what he had to say, but there's no answers right now. Only questions and just sadness around Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and I think it all points to J.I. Block M. Harbaugh not getting his team prepared for this game. We know that in the past he hasn't gotten his team prepared for the biggest games. Obviously, the Deep South Buckeyes, if they have to play on the road against Wisconsin or Penn State, those are losses, and usually ugly losses. And then, of course, you mentioned the bowl games. But this wasn't supposed to be a big game just because the competition level was supposed to be so low. The Spartans were anywhere between a 19 and I believe a 21.5 point underdog throughout the course of the week. So a 3-touchdown favor for Michigan. Even if you take your foot off the pedal, even if you avert your attention a little bit, you should be able to, despite the intensity of the rivalry, win the game and win the game with ease. Maybe there's a late touchdown. A late touchdown by the Spartans. You only win by 10. But this is a game that you thought that Michigan would be able to win with ease. And Harbaugh and his team they weren't the better team on the field. They certainly weren't the tougher team on the field. And I think what's interesting is, while I've called for Jim Harbaugh to be fired since the end of the 2018 season, when he went to 0-4 against the Buckeyes, and then some more jumped on board after the end of the 2019 season when he dropped to 0-5, I think we're starting to see a massive shift in the Wolverine fan base on Jim Harbaugh's job security. A lot more want him fired. They're not sitting around with that same old lame excuse about, well, who are you going to get that's better than Jim Harbaugh? Because now you can see, what has Jim Harbaugh done? He has not developed a star quarterback, because Joe Milton certainly didn't look like the next Cam Newton when he was playing against the Spartans. He can't win the Big Ten. He can't win the Big Ten East. He hasn't even been competitive against Ohio State except for one time. He's only won one bowl game. And I think Michigan fans are sitting out there saying, well, yeah, actually, somebody out there should be able to do a better job than Jim Harbaugh compared to what he's doing right now, because this isn't good enough. There's a reason why he's the only Power 5 coach with less than 2 years left on his deal, and I think there are a lot of fans out there that aren't saying, let's extend him right now. Some are saying, let's fire him now. Some are saying, let's wait till the end of the season. Some are saying, maybe wait till the end of next year and just let him ride out. But hardly anybody is saying, hey, this is our guy, go blue, let me get some more khaki so I can look like J.I. Block M. Harbaugh.
Well, people can say whatever they want, and that's fine. Everybody can have their opinion, but there's zero chance that Jim Harbaugh is going to get fired, like this week or next week. That's just not happening.
True.
But there is a chance, and I would say right now a pretty good chance, that at the end of the year Jim Harbaugh would just leave and head to the pros. Jim Harbaugh's not going to get fired. Now you could say, well, they don't want him back and they don't want to re-sign him, so it's the same thing. That's fine, but he's not going to get fired. And he is in the unique position. Not many coaches in college can go 5 and now 6 years and be winless against your rivals, 500 against another one, and then be able to just jump up and go to the NFL. In fact, I don't know if there's any coach that could do that, but there'll be an NFL team that would want him. Certainly, if there wasn't an NFL team, like I'm not saying it's 100%, but I would say it's pretty good chance that there would be an NFL team that would want him. There's pretty good chance that there'd be a middle of the road Power 5 conference team that would want him. I certainly think there would be a Group of 5 university that would want to hire him. So he'll have plenty of opportunities. And I've always felt like if the tide turned and there were enough important people at Michigan that didn't want him to coach anymore, then he would just leave. And I've always felt like that. That's why I wanted to give him an extension before the season, because even if it didn't work out, I don't think that like if it is right now, like let's say they lose another game before Ohio State, and maybe even more, like it's not like he's going to be like, extend me, I want to stay around here. I think he'll just leave at that point. He's got options. That's always been the point here, even if he had an extension. So, you should be mad. If you're a Michigan fan, if you have any passion, about the team, you should be mad as hell. Everybody is, and now you just got to see what they can do with the rest of the season. But I wouldn't get hung up on him like, getting a contract extension or.
Oh, he's not going to get an extension.
No, he's not. Well, you know what, Ward Manuel. I think Ward Manuel knows his spot here. That Jim Harbaugh,
and how angry would Michigan fans be if he got a contract extension? If you assume that he loses to Ohio State at the end of the year, and you assume that there's another loss, perhaps to Penn State, it doesn't look like they're going to lose to Wisconsin because they might not even play next weekend, and if they do, Wisconsin's going to be so undermanned. But I mean, Indiana, that's going to be a tough game. The Penn State game's going to be a tough game. If they have a 3-loss season. And then get destroyed by Ohio State, I think the fans would be irate if they brought Jim Harbaugh back. They wouldn't just say, hey, let's just keep it going for another year or two.
Well, the one part is Harbaugh's always been good for business, whether you whether you accept that he can't beat Ohio State and win games on the road.
How long does that continue with games like this in the Ohio State game?
Well, you know what? I think it depends on the gate receipts. Like, you can tell when you look around Michigan Stadium, 110,000, you knew that the enthusiasm, the people showing up, remember they had to start giving away, a 2-liter of Coke, and you'd get some Michigan tickets. If you can't fill up the stadium, then, that's when
they're always going to do that.
Well, no, I think that what you're talking about, like the interest, if it's at, peak interest is at 100, people are still, they like Jim Harbaugh. I think they bought that Ohio State was a juggernaut, and, he's doing everything else almost. And, maybe they weren't going to be a college football, a playoff team. Just so happened that Ohio State, the biggest rival, resided in their division, so it was just like, you know what, he's the best we got, let's ride him out. But I think, like you said, I think heading into the season, I still thought Jim Harbaugh was the best man for the job, and I don't think that I understand that today, that it doesn't, there looks like after this year, it doesn't feel like he's the best man for the job, like after losing to Ohio State.
It can't possibly be, especially when you see that Mel Tucker has so much less talent than Michigan State, has had much less time to build camaraderie and to know his team, and he was able to go on the road and beat them. And then, looking at what actually took place in the game, one thing that you mentioned was about putting those corners on an island. I mean, this was not Don Brown, Jim Harbaugh, and those defensive backs going up against Trevor Lawrence and T. Higgins, or Devontae Smith and Tua Tagovailoa. It was Rocky Lombardi and Ricky White. Ricky White is a true freshman playing in his second career game. Nobody had pretty much even heard of this guy. And they made Ricky White look like DeAndre Hopkins. How in the world do you let him get 8 catches for 196 yards? I think a lot of Michigan fans are saying, why we're watching the game saying, why is Vincent Gray even on the field? He looked like the Michigan football version of Tease the Snail Tabor. And if he's the best Michigan has, or one of the 2 best that they have, who's worse if they're getting burned by a true freshman? Either he shouldn't have been out there, or if he is going to be out there, they needed the safety help. Because if you're going to be rushing 7 or 8 guys, you got to get to the quarterback. They had 0 sacks, and they're letting guys burn them deep when they're a true freshman. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, Ricky White had 1 catch for 5 yards against Rutgers. Yeah, it's on both sides. You know what? Your offense has got to score more than 24 points. I mean, this is 2020. You got to be putting up in the 40s, at least in the 30s. So as bad as it was for on the defensive side, and it stuck out like a sore thumb because they were routinely getting beat 30 yards, 40, penalty. It was embarrassing. Couldn't get home, couldn't get any pressure. Lombardi 3-step drop and just throw it up in the air. And you know what? They should have even done it more than they did. I mean, they were actually, if a team can play it conservative and then throw bombs on your secondary, that's what they were doing. They were still keeping Michigan in the game. The Wolverines still had a chance. But you know what? I haven't seen a quarterback that's been able to throw the ball down the field with accuracy in a while now. Like Shea Patterson couldn't do it. And through these first two games, Joe Milton, you know, the guy's got an arm and he can throw it to the moon. But you know what? You can hit a driver 400 yards, but if you're going to put it over in the right fairway, that's not going to do you any good. And that's what the thing is right now with Milton, too. And I know it was only his second game, you know, and he threw the ball from the hash across the field. He looked pretty good there. But he was locking on receivers, and he couldn't throw the ball down the field. That hurts you. When you can't run the ball in between the tackles either, and you're only putting up 24 points, and you're running a 2-minute offense that takes you 4 minutes. I mean, that was a
terrible drive at the end of the fourth quarter. You got 5:11 to go, and you're down 10 points, and you're dinking and dunking, and I mean, Michigan State was happy to give up those yards and have, I think it was 37 seconds left after they scored the touchdown. That was embarrassing for Michigan.
Yeah, Josh Gaddis didn't do a good job, and then the other part, and we know Don Brown didn't, and Jim Harbaugh, when's he going to step in? Like, I'll tell you this, like if Joe Milton 6'5" and 243, and Michigan finally had something going where to get behind and get some momentum in an empty stadium, you can try to manufacture some excitement and everything. Like, you know, they did a little bit of that, but they finally had 2 runs from Haskins, and they get down there by the goal line, and they take Milton out to go to, you know, the Wildcat. And you know what? I think Wildcat's a good idea to have and to practice in certain situations. Like if Milton got his bell rung or, I don't know, ran for 50 yards or something, you felt like he needed a blow, you could go, hey, let's go to the Haskins special down there at the goal line. But if Joe Milton just handed the ball off twice, he was perfectly fine. I want Joe Milton running over Haskins, especially when you're talking about that little shot put, run up, you know, toss the ball over the middle. Yeah. Terrible play call. I don't want to hear it. Like, you know, and I heard Gaddis like, it's a great call if it works. And no, it was never a good idea. It's not a good idea to take your best player off the field in a situation where he's 100% healthy and go to some gimmick. That's not a good idea from the beginning. I didn't like the explanation. He's like, yeah, well, it's on me. It would have, if it worked, you know, it would have been great. No, it was a bad idea from the start. Don't do it. You know what? The Wildcat worked really nice when Ronnie Brown was left-handed and he was running down the line and he could gun the ball, and it kept teams off balance. And you know what? Yeah, it worked for Derrick Henry a couple weeks ago in overtime. He was blasting through, you know, at 6'3" and, you know, 255 pounds or whatever Derrick Henry is. And I know they put Haskins in that situation again, but it was a bad idea.
Well, also, given the way he played, I don't know that it's even fair to say that Joe Milton is Michigan's best player. I mean, I think he had 51 passing attempts and only 300 yards passing. 6 yards a pop is not all that great. But speaking of,
he's got to be their best player. Like, you know,
he needs to be better. Is he their best? I don't know.
He needs to be their best player. If he's not their best player, then they're in big trouble.
Correct. And speaking of Gaddis and Milton, I want to share with the people out there a comment that Josh Gaddis made earlier in the day today. I think it was either today or yesterday while in a radio interview. And it was taken from the Detroit Free Press website. I'll put it up on the screen. And it said that Gaddis said that with younger, inexperienced players up and down the offense, he had thought there was a disconnect in getting ready for the Spartans. And then he said, quote, I did not think that our preparation was up to par, up to the standard that we needed to be, and that falls on me. And I think that when you look at the way that Michigan played, they didn't seem to be prepared. And when you think about how, in general, people view that Ohio State takes the rivalry with Michigan more seriously than Michigan, and how it seems like Michigan State takes the rivalry with us more seriously than Michigan does, that quote echoes it. And then you got this quote from Joe Milton, the quarterback, and he was asked by Mike Stone, a.k.a. Stoney, about Antoine Simmons, arguably the best player on Michigan State's defense. Here is how that question and answer went.
And did you realize that Antoine Simmons, was that good of a player?
John Simmons, who's that?
34, I think, was his number.
I mean, I wasn't really worried about him. I mean, he's a heck of a player, but wasn't on my radar.
Unbelievable that you could be the starting quarterback of the Michigan Wolverines. You just played your arch rival and lost to them. And when a media member asks you about Antoine Simmons, you say, "Who is that?" And then you say, "Well, I'm sure he's a heck of a player," which is just, throwing in a stock answer that a lot of athletes put in there, and then saying he wasn't on my radar. That kind of answer suggests sometimes players, well, maybe they're a little bit absent-minded, but I actually believe him when he said that he didn't know who he was. Based on the way he played, based on that answer, it suggested that he didn't do enough preparation. He didn't do his homework, because you should know who that is. I get that sometimes you want to disrespect, quote-unquote, little brother and say, "I don't know who that is. It's just a nobody." But I've never seen that in the course of the Michigan State rivalry where they say, "I don't know who this particular player was." And you just lost to Michigan State. He was one of the best players in that game. You talk about that Wildcat pass, and Antoine Simmons was the guy that jumped up and tipped that pass away. And then, despite having the time to watch him during film, during the game, and afterwards, you tell the media, "I don't know who that is." Who you're talking about? That's ridiculous.
Well, I'm sure he knows who number 34 is, even if he didn't know who Simmons was. But I do think that he was, pulling the, we're Michigan, and I'm going to throw the disrespect card out there. He could have handled that better. What else can you say about that? Hopefully he'll be able to learn from that situation. But, here's two things that are going on with Ohio State and Michigan State. When Justin Fields in the offseason was asked about Michigan and their success against them, he's like, "We think about them every day. We hate them. We're always thinking about Michigan. We're always putting something in about Michigan." They're always running hot on Michigan. And Michigan State, they're always running hot with the disrespect on Michigan. That's all they talk about. They're obsessed with, getting up there. Of course, with D'Antonio, that was the whole thing, and it worked really well. It was great for him until the end when he fell off. But that's when you thought, this was just going to be an easy one this first time out. But, the disrespect and the hatred runs deep, and I think that was a factor. There's another thing that Daxton Hill, the Michigan safety, put out there after the game when he said, we prepared for them running the ball. We didn't think they were just going to throw it like that. I was like, whoa.
Well,
yeah, he wasn't ready for that either. Yeah, that's a culture thing.
The OC, Daxton Hill, and the quarterback all suggested that they did not prepare well.
Yeah, Michigan got their pants pulled down on national TV and got paddled. It was an embarrassment. They were a 3-touchdown favorite, and they're reeling right now. There's no other way you could put it. I mean, they need to get a bunch of W's. They need to look impressive, and they need to try to put this one behind them. But as we sit here just a couple days out, man, they just got to take it. You just got to own it. It was bad. It was embarrassing. It was all those things. Both of the coordinators, the head coach, he doesn't seem to have any answers either. I was hoping that he was going to get a little bit riled up at his news conference yesterday. He wasn't. He was just kind of like, "No, we got to work on it. Yeah, we're open for changes." And, that's not what I was looking for. But, hey, you know what? They've dug themselves a gigantic hole right now. And, you know what? Unless they're insulating themselves, everybody's against them right now. It's not like if you're a Michigan fan, you're rooting against Michigan or you're rooting against Harbaugh, or you're rooting against the players. You just watch them, get embarrassed by a team that they were supposed to rough up. What else are you supposed to do?
Yeah. Do we have any feedback to get to?
We have lots of feedback. Let's go. Let's see here on Facebook. Paul says, how many years in Harbaugh's contract? He is signed through this year and then the following year.
Correct.
So that's 2 years. If you include this year, if you don't include this year, 1 year.
Yeah.
That's where his contract
at the end of 2021, his contract expires.
On YouTube, Keith is up first, and he says, "What's up, guys? I remember type in two guys that Michigan was not a sure thing to beat State, and it certainly was an upset, but Michigan's coaching sucks, especially on defense." Sideshow Rod says Harbaugh for president in 2024. It's a good one, Raj.
Is he going to run the country like his football team?
Fire Harbaugh. Here's another one. Who cares? Who wants to hire him? He just needs to go from Michigan. Here's another one from Greg, who says, what's up? Fire Harbaugh. He isn't a college coach. He needs to go back to the NFL. This one's from Mark, who says, nice bet, Chappie.
Thank you.
And Greg says, I love following Chappie on Twitter. Keith says, Tease Tabor is one of the most Lioness draft picks ever. He was the worst bust second pick. A 4.840 corner. Yeah, that might work. All right. There's your feedback. That's the live chat on YouTube from the Michigan perspective of Saturday's game, U of M, MSU.
Yeah, now let's turn the page to the second chapter.
And that gets us to Michigan State. State fans will say, hey, Jeff, you're disrespecting Michigan State. They won the game. Why are you putting them second? And I think that's a decent point. All right, let's go. MSU, they did get the victory, the surprise victory. Mel Tucker, I'll never forget him. That picture, it's emblazoned in my brain. Him sitting in the front seat of the bus with Paul Bunyan next to him. He's pretty happy now, but the Spartans, after losing to Rutgers, they beat Michigan. Now they travel to Iowa City to take on the Hawkeyes. Iowa 0-2. They lost to Purdue by they lost to Northwestern and Purdue. One of those by 1 point. I'm not sure which one. And so the question now is, how's Michigan State look to you?
Well, when it comes to disrespecting Michigan State, let's not forget, I bet Michigan State plus those 21.5 points, so I had more respect for them. And I one of the reasons that I picked Michigan State to cover was obviously, because I saw that result in the Maryland-Minnesota game and realized that Michigan beat an atrocious team. But then I also saw that Michigan State's not going to turn the ball over 7 times. And if you look at some of the numbers in that Rutgers game, they forced 3 turnovers. They held Rutgers to 276 yards and 16 first downs. So their defense actually played well. And outside of the 7 turnovers, which is a lot, that was the story of the game, they actually outplayed them. But a week ago, there was no reason to be excited about Spartan football. There was no reason for optimism because they lost to Rutgers in the fashion that they did. And when he spoke to Michigan, to the media about the team down the road, and he was falling asleep, and we were making fun of him last week, I can't imagine that any Spartan fan was happy to start calling them the team down the road, and we're right behind our guy. We trust Mel Tucker. I know last week you were saying, hey, he gets a complete pass this year because of the coronavirus and because he came in so late due to Mark D'Antonio stepping down in February. I didn't buy that because of the fact that he lost to Rutgers and the team looked so bad, and there shouldn't be an excuse for the type of performance that he put out there, and he had to do something significant to get the fan base back on board. You beat Michigan in the Big House, fans or no fans. You beat Michigan in the Big House when you're a 3-touchdown underdog. Now all of a sudden the fan base is on board with Sleepy Mel. All of a sudden they want to buy Sleepy Mel Tucker pillowcases and bed sheets and everything else, and all of a sudden all the Michigan State fans are embracing the nickname the team down the road. I thought the game was going to be closer, but the fact was going to be a close loss for Michigan State. But the fact that they won, the fact that they were up by double digits in the fourth quarter, I think now Tucker's got a heck of a lot more leeway with the fan base. Even if they finish the year 1-7, Michigan State fans are going to say, hey, that one win was against Michigan. We've got ourselves some sort of future. And then you look at the progress they made from game 1 to game 2. 7 turnovers to 0 turnovers. I think they only gave up 1 sack. They dominated the line of scrimmage in this game. They did so with that terrible roster, and Rocky Lombardi was airing out passes down the field to Ricky White. One of the things that we were asking ourselves 2 weeks ago about Michigan State is who's going to step up and be a playmaker? Well, Ricky White. And when you look at the fact that he's a true freshman, well, then you know that you have at least the next 2 years after this one to look at Ricky White. So a lot of positives from Michigan State coming out of this game. But I think the biggest is that now that you got this win over Michigan of all teams, you can trust Mel Tucker.
Yeah, you know what? Naylor was back, and they had the other freshman that did a good job against Rutgers last week. And like I said, White, just had the 1 catch. But, yeah, he was amazing. The first catch, the first touchdown, you might have had great coverage on him. And, Lombardi put it on the money and stuck it right in there, and White caught it and was able to get the feet down. But he's one of those tricky wide receivers where You always talk about catch radius up top. He was, you said Hopkins. I don't know if you were talking about the style that he plays, but he like dives on the ground and is rolling around. Hopkins is always doing that, catching the ball. It's like a low catch radius as well. But yeah, he was amazing. Like when you put on a performance like that, fast and smart in history, just behind Plaxico Burress, that part was amazing. But you know what? There was more amazing feats there. Lombardi already talked about, but the defensive line really played well. Simmons dominated the game, 34. Who, I know you
Who's
don't know
that?
who that is.
Huh?
I don't know. He's from Pioneer, but he's been pretty good for a couple of years there for Michigan State. But the one thing that they keyed in on, Michigan does all this movement and all this eye candy pre-snap, and State bought none of it. They just watched the guards, and wherever the guards went, they had the nose, and it took them directly in and funneled them to the football. And Michigan, Josh Gaddis and Jim Harbaugh and Ed Warner, none of them adjusted to that either. They just said, no, we're just going to keep running our stuff here in the middle of the line. When the success was when they kicked the ball or when they got outside and started, running the ball wide, that was what was working for them. They should have done that more. So, yeah, from all sides there, Michigan State's defensive line you got to give it up to, and certainly Lombardi and Ricky White.
Well, and I also think that this game shows just how important it is to beat rivals. A lot of Michigan fans are so dissatisfied with Jim Harbaugh because he's 1-6 at home against Michigan State, and Ohio State has never beaten Ohio State. Mel Tucker loses to Rutgers, but I'm not saying Michigan State fans have forgotten about that game, but it's easy to put that in the rearview mirror when you've just beaten Michigan. And one thing I remember seeing about Mel Tucker was last year in his first year as a head coach at Colorado. He had a bad year, 5-7. But he did two things that I think are important. He beat his rivals, and he beat a ranked team on the road. Two of their biggest rivals at Colorado are Colorado State, obviously, in-state rival, and Nebraska. He beat those two teams, I believe, in the first two games of the year, and then I think it was the fourth game of the year, they beat a ranked team in Arizona State on the road. What does he do at Michigan State? In his second game, he does all that. He beats their biggest rival, and he beats a ranked team on the road. Meanwhile, you look at J.I. Block M. Harbaugh, he was only a 9-point underdog to Ohio State last year. Got crushed. They were a 3.5-point favorite in 2018. Got crushed. They no matter what the point spread is, they always get crushed. I believe he's never won a game as an underdog. And Sleepy Mel Tucker, 21.5-point underdog, and beats the biggest rival. That's how you endear yourself to the fan base. That's how you get the trust of the fan base and let them know and understand that while it's going to take time to rebuild, they can trust you because in the most important game of the year, your team was ready while the other team didn't know who your starting linebacker was. The other team's offensive coordinator was saying, yeah, we just didn't prepare our young guys for this game.
Yeah, I saw that stat that Michigan's never won as an underdog under Harbaugh. That jumped out. I didn't realize that. They were close in 2016 with Ohio State, the play that came down to the end there, the JT Barrett. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like if, how many times can you say it? Things might have been different, if that happened, but it didn't. And that was a long time ago. So they're in a tough spot right now.
They've also never beaten Penn State as an underdog, Wisconsin as an underdog. I don't know if they've been an underdog in a bowl game, but obviously if they were, they didn't win any of those games. It's surprising that you could be over 5 years into a program, and obviously they don't have a lot of opportunities, maybe 2-3 games a year, but never win as an underdog. And obviously sometimes as a favorite you lose.
Do you have any graphs or videos or anything you're going to put up for Michigan State?
No, I don't have any graphs or videos for Michigan State.
Total disrespect.
I got the picture of Mel Tucker right there. See?
Chapman orders up the book, puts Michigan State second.
Here's the problem. I'll be honest. About an hour before the show, I was looking for video of Mel Tucker, and I was looking at his post-game press conference, and it was sleepy, boring Mel Tucker comments. Like, when you're looking for juicy stuff, don't look for Mel Tucker because he's a boring guy. So
you should have put the picture with him smoking a cigar or sitting on the bus with Paul Bunyan.
I could have done that. That's fair. So good on you, the Michigan man, sticking up for the Spartans.
All right, we have some feedback at least. Not everybody's disrespecting the Spartans like you.
I
Let's
picked
go.
them.
Greg, who says, with Wisconsin getting more positive tests and another canceled game against Purdue, should the Big Ten maybe have a Zoom meeting and cancel the season?
I don't think that they're there yet, but obviously this is something that has to be really troubling them. They're gonna have. I mean, they play 7 games a week in the conference, and through this coming weekend, they're gonna have almost 10% of their games canceled because it'll be 2 out of 21, both of them being the Wisconsin Badgers. When you see the coronavirus numbers spiking all across the country, nearly 100,000 new cases on Friday, and pretty soon experts say we're not just going to be at that consistently, we'll be averaging well over 100,000. And you see that in Big Ten country, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska in particular, they're seeing big numbers. It's going to take care of itself. If somehow the numbers come down, or even if they stabilize at this really high number, perhaps they can get through with just a few more cancellations. But, I mean, we're not just going to be able to sit here and say that nobody else is going to get Rona. I know it's a different team, but Jared Davis was just placed on the COVID restricted list for the Detroit Lions within the last couple of hours. So people are going to keep on getting it. Teams are going to have some instances where a guy tests positive and that's it. And other times there's going to be an outbreak like you have in Wisconsin. But I will say this, for the game against Michigan next weekend, that's if it happens. There's no guarantee it'll happen. If it happens, that's a must-win for Michigan, because while Graham Mertz is going to be able to return for that game, everybody who tested positive 2 days after that game, so that Sunday or later, is going to be ineligible because you have to sit out for 21 days. So there's going to be a ton of Badgers ineligible to play in that game.
Yeah, they all feel like they're must-wins. Yeah, who knows if they'll play that game. And the way it's going to go, I mean, the first couple things that will fall is that if Wisconsin isn't able to play against Michigan, the rules heading in were that you had to at least play 6 games to be eligible to play in the conference championship game. So that would go out the window. And then after that, and then it's just trying to see if you can patch anything together and just play the games, just to play them. But if all the other teams start losing a bunch of games too, well, then they could, change the rules. So, yeah, I mean, this thing has always been hanging on by a thread. Remember, like, all what we talked about in July and August, maybe they'll just get 5 games in. Who knows how many games they'll get in. There's a lot of projections of that they would get a couple games in, and that would be it because it's football. But, it's a week-by-week thing. If you told me that we weren't going to have a college football playoff or like that Big Ten champions weekend right now, I would say, you know what, that's a possibility.
We didn't have March Madness.
No, and that teams, when you look at the numbers there, that teams are going to miss games. Wisconsin right off the bat, missing another game here. I mean, it can happen to anybody and any team. So especially with the Big Ten, who has these stringent rules. The one thing that I saw today, somebody was asking a question that, let's say Ohio State, who looks like they don't have anybody to contend with after they blew your team off the field last week in Happy Valley. But let's say Ohio State does get to that, their 8th and the 9th game, whoever they play on. Let's just say it's Wisconsin, and they go ahead and beat them. And then after that, let's say Justin Fields comes down with COVID. Is he then still – does he have to follow the Big Ten guide of 3 weeks, or can he get into some other kind of?
Well, the CFP doesn't have to follow the Big Ten's rules because those aren't Big Ten games.
Yeah, well, right. Okay, so they wouldn't have to follow it. There you go.
But you might be right, because the Big Ten might say, hey, if you want to be a member of the Big Ten Conference, then you have to abide by our rules and you have to skip the CFP. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. I would imagine that they'd find a way to let Justin Fields play for the good of the conference, to make the conference look good.
Well, right, and everybody wants to see Fields if he would be able to get in there. Everybody wants to see Clemson, Alabama, and just like Trevor Lawrence, he's going to miss this week. Yeah. But people want to see him in the ACC championship game. They want to see Fields. They want to see Lawrence. They want to see Mac Jones and all those Bama wide receivers and running backs in the college football playoff. And then they want to see Coastal Carolina and Cincinnati, in there. One of those group of 5 slide in there in this odd year. All right, a couple more here. Michigan, they're the Cowboys of college football. I'll name it hype. What's the next must-win for Penn State, chap? That's from Treppa.
How about Maryland? How about Maryland this weekend to get one victory? I mean, like the rest of the schedule isn't all that challenging. I mean, they play the two other. Well, I mean, Michigan might be challenging, but Michigan just lost to Michigan State. Indiana might be the second best team. They might even be the third best team in the Big Ten East, because a lot of folks would say that Penn State should have won and they outplayed the Hoosiers. But they should be better than Michigan. Iowa, are they going to be a good team this year? Doesn't look like it. Nebraska's the other crossover. They haven't played Rutgers and Maryland yet. So there's a chance they could run the table. But, you run the table after losing to Indiana and Ohio State, it doesn't mean that much.
Paul in the third chapter wants us to talk about Big Ten hockey. It starts November 13th. No, he doesn't say that, but it's Paul. I'm looking forward to Big Ten hockey as well. Maybe we'll slide a chapter in there at some point coming up. We'll see what Chapman says about that. But now we are ready to move from college football to pro football.
That's right. In the third chapter, that takes us to Sunday. It was the same old Lions Sunday. It was against the Colts, and it was without question the biggest game of the season for the Lions. They were 3-3, had that 2-game winning streak thanks to the annual Patricia Push. The Patricia Push. And the Lions, they beat a couple of losing teams in Jacksonville and Atlanta during that Patricia Push to get to 500. But then they had to face one of the big boys in the Colts. And you either win and you're a contender, or you lose and you're proven to be a fraud again. And what do? They didn't jump out to a double-digit lead, but they did have a 7-0 lead thanks to a blocked punt and a great pass to Marvin Jones. But the Lions had 80 yards of offense at the half, a 20-7 deficit at the half, and the Colts outscored the Lions 41-14 after that early touchdown by the Lions to win 41-21. And really the only way to describe that game was same old Lions. To make things worse, Kenny Golladay suffered a hip injury, and he's week to week guaranteed to be out for this coming weekend. Trey Flowers suffered an injury as well, and he's been placed on the IR, so he's out for the next 3 games. Dennis, what do you think about that game that you saw on Sunday? And really going forward, what now for the Lions? What now?
Well, what now is that I've done a terrible job picking the Lions this year. First of all, I picked them to go 9-7, but I thought they were going to beat the Bears, and we all know what happened there. The one game that I got right, I thought they were going to go to Green Bay and get destroyed. That happened, but I picked them to I couldn't have picked them to lose against the Saints, so I got that one right too. Was that a cover? I forget. No, they just lost that game.
No.
Yeah, but I picked them when they against the Jags. I started rooting against them because I wanted everybody gone. Of course, they won that one, and then it was the same thing against Atlanta. I picked against. So I thought they were going to lose. I wasn't so strong against Jacksonville, but I really thought that they were going to lose to the Falcons. If they were playing the Falcons again this week, I'd pick the Falcons. Man, they should have lost to them. But so I haven't picked them right yet, and for some reason on this show last week, I picked the Lions to beat the Colts. That was stupid. And they really showed, they really showed what kind of football team they are. They can beat bad teams, but when they're playing, and I don't think the Colts are anything special. They made Phillip Rivers look like the old Phillip Rivers. I mean, he's out there with no arm strength and, blowing them off the field. I was going to say it's my favorite thing, but it's probably the saddest thing ever is that I saw Dave Burkett live tweeting during the game. And there was 4 minutes to go. And Burkett's like, the 500 fans or so that are allowed to be here, even they're leaving. It's like, wow. those are family and friends.
Yeah. Sorry, honey. I'm going home. I'm going to watch Red Zone. I'm not watching you suckers after you threw that pick 6. Yeah, that is embarrassing. Look, I haven't wavered on this team. When they were 1-3, I said the team season was over. I said, yeah, they'll make a little Patricia Push, but they're going to be about a 5-11, 6-10 team. I said 5-11 before the season. And what do they do against one of the best teams, or at least one of the best defenses in the NFL, a team that's an overall good team? They lose by 20. They put up 80 yards in the first half. They give up 21 points in the fourth quarter. Remember dagger time? That's how you do dagger time. You put up 21 points on the opposition when you're ahead in the fourth quarter. And the other thing is they had a bunch of same old Lions moments. You had the Danny Shelton body slam when it's 3rd and 4. They're about to get off the field, and the whistle blows. They're waiting and waiting and waiting for the referees for them to break it up, and Danny Shelton goes WWE. Only thing he needed was a folding chair, body slams him. You had the Matthew Stafford fumble when they were in field goal range. You had the Justin Coleman 41-yard pass interference penalty. You had the Matt Stafford pick six. Just so many same old Lions moments. As a matter of fact, I put a poll up on Twitter asking what was the same old Lions moment of the game. I said that it was the Danny Shelton body slam.
Yeah, that feels right to me.
Well, that's what everybody else said as well, or at least 47.6%, which was the leader. 33.3% said it was Stafford's pick six. 11.9% said the pass interference, and 7.1% said that it was the Stafford fumble. But, I mean, so many times, if you're a Lions fan, which thankfully I'm not anymore, you start to get your hopes up. It doesn't take much, only a winning streak of 1 or 2 games, and then you see not just a loss, but a blowout loss with a bunch of SOL moments to get you thinking, like, why in the world did I ever have to become a Lions fan? Why did my mom and or dad indoctrinate me into this sorry team? When am I going to finally get rid of this team, period? It was embarrassing if you're a Lions fan. And now you know there is clarity. We said this on Thursday. There's clarity. If they had won, you'd have to root for them. If they were a winning team, we'd just beaten a good team. They lost. They did so in SOL fashion with a bunch of SOL moments by 20 points, and you lose arguably your best defensive player and certainly your best offensive player for the next game, perhaps the next few games. Yeah, you root for them to tank like a no-limit soldier.
Yeah, it's that time of year for the Lions. Let's get Greg on the live chat that says the Sleepy Lions can make the playoffs with the new NFL COVID agreement. The playoff scenarios, the Lions can get into the playoffs with a 6-10 or possible 7-9. What's your take on this? What a joke. Well, he's talking about if they miss some games, there's the proposal by the owners that, it was 12 teams that got in. 6 from each conference prior to this year. Now they cranked it up 1 to 7 this year. And what Greg's talking about, the proposal is 8 playoff teams. So they certainly would be in playoff contention at that point. You know, if you had 6 wins heading into the last 2 weeks of the season, and they could say, yeah, we weren't technically in playoff contention with 16 teams getting in. What is your take on that, Jeff?
Well, first of all, they're the 10 seed right now with the 3-4 record. The NFC is loaded, so they'd have to make up a lot of ground just to get to the 8 seed. That's past teams that like the San Francisco 49ers. I think they're the 8 seed or the 9 seed, and they won the Super Bowl.
Jimmy G and Kittle are out for a while here. Isn't
that great? Well, how about this? You think about winnable games for the Lions. The next 2 might be some of the most winnable games for the rest of the year against the Vikings and Washington FT. And if Jared Davis, who's on the COVID list, turns out that he tested positive, maybe he's just out right now because he came into contact with someone who's positive. But if he tested positive, and then by the time we do our show on Thursday, we find out there's an outbreak on the Lions, and they have to cancel that game. They already have their bye. They cancel that game. Well, that's a game that's canceled against a team that is winnable. I'm not going to predict them to win that game, but that's a winnable game. And if they have to miss a week after that, that's a winnable game as well before they get to Thanksgiving and the schedule turns tough. So the Lions, they're not in a position right now where they want to lose any games, and they're a bad football team with injuries right now at key positions. You can't be thinking about the playoffs. You got to be thinking, can we beat the Vikings? And the answer right now is not looking good.
No, not with Dalvin Cook coming back and running wild, and not without Kenny Golladay and Trey Flowers. You just mentioned that. That's and Jared Davis, actually had looked halfway decent in some of these games. So, yeah, they're up against it right now. I don't feel like I'm going to wait till Thursday, but the my lean is to the Vikings right now
same here.
in that game.
And by the way, with regard to that Lions game, I pointed my bony finger of blame for that loss at Matthew Stafford. When you go into that, when you're supposed to be the highest paid and best player on the team, and you throw a pick six when you're trying to be making a comeback, when you lose a fumble when you're in field goal range, when you have, it says right there, about 80 yards passing, when you have 75 passing yards in the first half, and the only reason that you had that first touchdown was because it was set up by a blocked field goal, you're not doing your job as the quarterback of the Detroit Lions to make them contend against a team like the Indianapolis Colts. That was a pretty bad game by Matt Stafford.
Kelly Stafford just crossed you off her Christmas card list. So there you go.
Oh, man, dang. Oh, well.
Paul wants to know if the NHL is going to play in the bubble for the upcoming season. They haven't mentioned anything about that, and so who knows?
That's a tough sell, saying, all right, we're going to put you guys in a bubble for, even if it's not 82 games, 60 games. You're going to be away from everybody that you know up in Canada for, 4 months in a row or something like that, 5 months. That's a tough sell for pro athletes.
Right, especially since baseball went through it. They didn't go into a bubble into the playoffs. So I think that I think if we had to guess right now if the NHL would do it, I would say no, that they would not do that unless they got to a postseason scenario.
Yeah.
All right, you ready to go to the fourth chapter?
Let's do it.
All right, and that gets us to this is good news. The Tigers have hired a new manager, and he's an accomplished one. Got a World Series ring. AJ Hinch, your 32nd Tigers manager. I just made that up. I don't know if he was or not, but introduced as the new Tiger skipper. Chapman, what do you think of this hire by the Tigers?
Well, it was a bad move and a great move at the same time. It's a bad move because AJ Hinch is a cheater. He was part of that Astros trash can cheating scandal that led to the World Series championship, and he's going to forever carry that stain. I wish that the Tigers weren't a part of that at all. Obviously, they didn't cheat, but they hired the cheater, one of the cheaters on that team. And I'm just not a fan of cheating in sports. I know a lot of folks just like to shrug it off, whether it's banging on a trash can or buzzers or taking steroids, and they say it's no big deal. But I'm not a fan of steroid users in the Hall of Fame without any exceptions. And now that we've got a cheater leading the Detroit Tigers, if it was my choice, he would not have gotten an interview. There are other guys out there. That said, even without the cheating, AJ Hinch is a great manager. Without him, the Astros barely made the playoffs in the 2020 season. Obviously, when they got in, they got all the way to the ALCS. But this is a guy who knows how to use sabermetrics and analytics, and he's helped develop some of the best players in the game. He knows how to take a team from the bottom to the top. Obviously, that included cheating, but even without cheating, they were a very good team. And I think the Tigers were also very fortunate that the Chicago White Sox made a really dumb decision. They hired 76-year-old super senior citizen Tony La Russa to be their manager last week. I have to imagine if I was AJ Hinch that White Sox job was my top choice to go and be able to coach guys like Luis Robert and Tim Anderson and that loaded squad. It's ready made for a World Series run, and then they go after this super senior and Tony La Russa. The Tigers were gifted the opportunity to get him, and I actually heard a report from an ESPN reporter last week saying that move to hire La Russa was not popular in the White Sox organization and that it was Jerry Reinsdorf's move. But yeah, the Tigers made an upgrade going from a guy who lost 114 games last year and had one career playoff series win to a guy who won a World Series recently. They can partially thank their division mates, the Chicago White Sox, for that.
Yeah, you're right about the Tony La Russa stuff. The Tigers did get lucky that way. You know, the part about him cheating, it's not like I like it. He did serve his time, and the one thing when he talks about it, he's been open to talking about it. If he was like, I'm moving past this, I'm not answering any more questions.
Like Alex Bregman.
Right. If he acted like he was turned off by anybody ever asking him that, he's just seems to be approaching that the right way. We'll see how long that lasts there. But the one thing, even with him being with the Astros, I always enjoyed listening to him talk about the game, and that's going to continue with the Tigers. And so since he served his time there, and he is a good manager, I give him a clean slate in here. I've got two questions that I'd like to know from AJ Hinch, and one he's not going to answer. One would be, hey, if you found a way to, skirt the rules with the Tigers, would you give it your blessing?
He's not going to answer that and say,
no,
yes, I would.
No, I know he wouldn't, but I do wonder, what he would think there. The other one would be, what would he do if he was in the same spot as Cash in Game 6 of the World Series? Like, let's say Casey Mize wins a Cy Young, and then the following year the Tigers make it into the World Series, and he's at whatever it was, 70 some odd pitches, and he's dominant, but your numbers are spitting out, pull him out. What would he do? And I'd like to. He probably was. He's been interviewed a few times since then. I'm sure he was asked that question. I just didn't hear his response.
Well, he'd probably do whatever he did during the course of the season, and if he was taking him out on a regular basis in one-run games and
I don't
after
like that
73
answer.
pitches, and it worked out, then he would do it.
I don't like that answer.
But if he was leaving him in,
answer,
then I'm just saying that's probably what he would say.
Yeah, well, that's losing baseball. World Series is different. The pressure is different than what you're doing all year long, and you're trying to win a World Series. That's what I would counter back with him. So we might have a problem right from the get-go.
We might.
AJ Hinch. The other thing, but you know what? It would be nice if he brought George Springer with him. He's a free agent from Houston. That would be nice to put out in the Tigers outfield.
Yeah, Tigers need talent, but I don't think that Illich is ready to pay. By the way,
what about LeMahieu?
Well, that'd be great to bring him home. And you know what might help is if they bring Chris Newell, the former manager of the Birmingham Bloomfield Beavers, to the staff to be the hitting coach, because he was the former hitting coach of DJ LeMahieu and Jake Cronenworth of the San Diego Padres. But I have to imagine that he wants to win and he wants to make more money. He can do that in New York. By the way, speaking of a second chance, they were talking about AJ Hinch getting a second chance on MLB Network. And here's what Adnan Virk and Joel Sherman said about AJ Hinch getting a second chance in Detroit.
This is the start. You hope for the Tigers are building something, but for Hinch, this is a guy who, as I said, come with some history. Are you okay with it, Joel? You were very critical, obviously, what the Houston Astros did and Hinch's involvement with that.
So I think we've learned in baseball that when you do the crime, you do the time, and when the time is up, you're allowed back in baseball. During this postseason, Nelson Cruz, by his own fraternity, was named the Man of the Year. He served a suspension for PEDs, right? Alex Rodriguez was allowed back playing after the longest PED suspension in history, and is now enough in the good graces that every time you turn on the television during the postseason, he's there broadcasting baseball.
Yeah.
We are both punitive and forgiving as a country and a sport. He has been punished, he's been forgiven, and as Ron pointed out, I don't think you'll count to 30 before you get to wanting to have AJ Hinch manage your baseball team. I'm not sure you'd get to 5. So that being said, crime done, time done. He's one of the best managers. He's now hired.
And I think a lot of that is fair. His crime is done. He's one of the best managers in baseball. The Tigers got him. I just still don't like the fact that they hired a cheater. And when it comes to the 2021 outlook, one thing that you can say is that there isn't an Altuve, a Springer, a Correa, a Bregman, a Gurriel, a Kyle Tucker, that loaded team that he had in Houston. And when you look at what the Tigers have to offer, Candelario, maybe 2020 was a fluke. Willie Castro, maybe, short sample size. They got no catcher. Miggy's old. Paredes was terrible when he came up. And that pitching staff that he had in Houston, it's not here in Detroit because their ace was Matt Boyd, and the two prospects that came up, Mize and Skubal, face planted. So it's going to be a tough job. He needs more than just his managerial skill to get the Tigers anywhere close to 500.
He's going to hear it on the road. I wonder, I'll just ask you, if you were sitting behind the Tigers dugout, would you, and you're with your buddies there, you're going to be banging on a trash can, or are you going to be like, cat calling to Hinch, like, hey, why don't you use some of those buzzers with these Tigers? They suck.
If they're losing, I might. If they're losing a particular game that I'm at, then I'll be frustrated. If they're down, 7-1, say, hey, come on, we brought you here to bang on some trash cans. Let's go. I could see myself doing that, but I probably wouldn't go into the game thinking that.
He's going to hear it, especially on the road. Yeah, I mean, once you get, one or two of those, like, gigantic beers for $7.50, who knows? All bets are off. All right, speaking of bets, chap, that gets us to the fifth chapter.
How about that for a transition? Yeah. What are you looking to do? Obviously, there are no games today. Are no games tomorrow. So what are you looking at? The weekend football games?
Well, first I have to cough up. I've been doing a nice job here on the fifth chapter, betting games, and I was nickel and diming them all the way up till last week when I just started betting heavy, and I took the Bills minus 3.5. They won by 3. That's a loser. I put 200 on that. I took the Browns. I put 200 on them, so I lost a big fat 400, which now has me down to 275. I should have cashed that ticket when I could, but I looked at the menu, and a game that I like is the Ravens to bounce back and beat those Indianapolis Colts. They're going to go to the Indy to play that game. The Ravens have to give 2.5 points, but I think Baltimore can win on the road. And I'm back to betting 200. Let's see if I can get to 0. 200 on the Ravens minus 2.5.
Yeah, I was wrong on Thursday when I picked the Panthers to cover that 1.5 points. So that was a big L. I'm looking at this Sunday. The Seahawks are 3-point favorites at the Bills on Sunday. The Bills are 6-2. The Seahawks are 6-1. One thing you'd like to look at is point differential, and the Bills are minus 1 point differential. Seahawks are plus 41. I'm still going to take the Bills and the points, getting 3 points, because when teams travel from the West Coast to the East Coast, they struggle, especially in 1 p.m. games. So I'm taking the Bills plus 3.
And the Seahawks defense really stinks, so that's not a bad bet.
Yes, it does.
All right, we'll have more bets on Thursday, and we'll look ahead to the weekend games with the Lions taking on the Vikings, and both Michigan and Michigan State in action, at least at this time right now. So make sure you tune in, and we'll know who the president is by then.
Maybe.
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. So for Brian Chapman, I'm Dennis Fithian. Thanks for watching the fifth chapter. Good night.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, the people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the fifth chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spitting the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the fifth chapter.